rather scornfully and assured me that a nasty temper was one of the proofs of advancement. How foolish can you get? And they believed it. Little by little, all perspective was gone. Now, this isn't helpful. The individual keeps on going along this way until a situation arises in which they come face to face with an emergency in which the only solution would lie in the fact they were what they thought they were. That they did possess sufficient insight and understanding to solve a major issue. When this emergency arises, the issue is not solved because they haven't what it takes to solve it. Sometimes there is a very bitter disillusionment. It's a horrible thing to suddenly wake up and realize you've been studying for 20 years something that isn't so. Very discouraging. Also, that in the moment when all these things were supposed to produce their miracles, nothing happened. There are these bitter and painful experiences. And we see that the person who starts off on one of these tangents never knows where he's going to end. Unfortunately, too many of them end with mental breakdowns. They become so involved, so tied up, they can't possibly solve the situation. Another painful interlude that most of these persons come in contact with is the fact that they are so right and nobody else sees it. This is very unfortunate. They know that they are creatures of destiny, but the world won't accept them. Under such pressure as this, they become antisocial, turn against the world. They feel that they are being persecuted simply because they're not agreed with. This can get to be a very serious source of mental and emotional stress. Almost everything that arises from these false, basic attitudes become in turn almost everything that arises from these false, basic attitudes taking the life away from the simple dignities, the simple humanities that make things valuable. If, therefore, you are not careful, you can get into trouble. Here's another general phase of the matter which also has its problems, and that is the effect upon health. We've spoken about a little about the emotional and mental stress of these situations. Now let's speak about the physical, the possible damage that is done physically as a result of some of these procedures. Nearly all metaphysical practices involve a certain amount of stress. They create various kinds of fixed tensions of one kind or another. Most forms of concentration will do this in time. The individual, whether he realizes it or not, subjects his nervous system, particularly the autonomic system, to a tremendous amount of stress. The moment the confusion is set up in our relationships with life, the nervous system begins to flutter. Because the nervous system is very close to fear, anxiety, uncertainty, unreasonable hope, and the ups and downs of 1 minute of despair and the next minute of exaltation, the individual believing everything one moment and nothing the next moment, more or less disoriented much of the time, and becoming more and more hypersensitive, more and more defensive, because he is increasingly misunderstood by everybody else. Little by little, his life becomes miserable, unhappy, unadjusted, tension-ridden, stress-torn. And in a very reasonable length of time, the physical situation begins to reveal itself. It is very hard for the person to be under fear, anxiety, or intense imagination without punishing the bodily structure too much. So these people begin to experience lack of normal body functions. Respiration may become erratic. Various forms of tachycardia may develop. Elimination may get very bad. And most of all, we have the person who develops what I have often referred to as psychic flutters. This is an ailment in itself which is almost uniquely due to a psychosomatic symbolism. It is the gradual development within the personality of strange, unexplainable miseries, as we used to call them, particularly in the Deep South. They were often referred to as miseries, sometimes a little further north as agonies. But in any case, they were difficulties. Where most persons who have these psychic problems report strange feelings. They report motions moving inside of them, something like nerve filaments crawling under the skin. They describe something resembling the grand symbolism of the metaphors. Almost any mysterious, eccentric, uncomfortable, distressing feeling. They will have all the cold chills and hot flashes there are in the book. They will feel things moving up and down their spines, think their eyes are crossed, have trouble in swallowing, strange, mysterious moving migraines in various parts of the body. They will develop symptoms of arthritis one moment and of arteriosclerosis the next. They have many of them. But they are suffering from palpitations, fluterations, and everything you can think of. And they are sure, almost certain, that these different things all indicate the presence of some kinds of strange entities that are creeping up at them when they're not looking, scratching them when they're trying to relax, whispering unpleasant words into their ears when they're trying to sleep, tormenting their rest with dreams and visions that are not nice and not pleasant, and creating every kind of a nerve reflex that people do not enjoy. This is a very common group of symptoms. I could list hundreds of related symptoms in this area, but I think we have summed it up sufficiently to point out the general theme. To these people, all of these symptoms seem to signify the presence of some other entity, being, force, nature, or substance affecting them. Perhaps they think that some of these mysterious feelings are other people's thoughts bouncing off of them, or something. But as always, this type of thing begins to develop. I think the real answer to it is a gradual psychosomatic transference of total confusion. The individual has lost completely orientation. And perhaps we can imagine that the nervous system, under such complete psychic breakdown, simply loses its own rhythms and its own orderly processes, and begins to take on some similitude of the prevailing lack of organization and integration. In any event, we find that a large amount of psychic phenomena